So prior to Vista, we basically had the kernel, system services, admin, and I'm just going to, maybe this slice here is like a millimeter thick. So this is basically things running a standard user.
Okay.
And I only mention that for completeness because the system did support running as non-admin prior to Vista, but it wasn't really very usable. So a lot of applications broke. It was just too hard to administer. I've just put it there for completeness, but the size of that footprint is tiny.
Okay.
So what we had pre-Vista was the kernel, system services, and admin. Well, and this, all the code was running in one of these three, just, you know, pick. Well, it turns out that these things are all roughly equivalent. Basically, if you're admin, you can install a service. If you're an admin, you can install a driver. If you're a service, you can install a driver into the kernel, etc. So by definition, being present in any of these rings here, you have full control over the whole system. If you happen to run malicious software accidentally, basically the system is now owned. So that was the situation pre-Vista. Vista, actually I left off a ring here. Let me just see.
And I wonder, it's kind of hard to read this on this camera, but that's cool. We're keeping it a little, you know, it's Vista, but it's hard to see. So it's, I like the irony there.
So system services admin, and then I'm going to say limited services or hardened services. So these are, you know, these are services using the framework I just spoke about a few minutes ago. So really, we've transitioned from this mode of kind of three operating privilege levels, if you will, to a situation where we have many more compartments where code is running at different privilege levels. So we've got the kernel, it's still very highly privileged, of course. System services, the ones running as local system with no privileges stripped and no service hardening framework applied, they're still very privileged. Code running as admin can still penetrate system services in the kernel potentially. And then we move into the three new layers here. And if you look at the percentage of code that was running with full privilege level pre-Vista versus Vista, there's been a very dramatic shift there. So we've moved over 50% of the services that were previously here into this bucket here, for example. If you look at the code that's running in the user context, pre-Vista, all of it was running here, essentially. In Vista, the vast majority of it's running here with, you know, IE running here in the protected mode. And then in certain elevation scenarios where you need to be an admin, you've got code running here. But if you look at a steady state system, there's generally very little code running as admin. There's a lot of, you know, system service code running limited here. And then most of the code running as the user is going to be in these two here. So if something goes wrong, the system is in a much better position to protect the user.
Great.
So that's really an onion view of what I was talking about.
It's a little bit hard to see. I'm sorry for the people out there. It's just this color of
it's my handwriting,
of
too,
ink
I'm sure.
on white is hard for this camera to pick up. But I think people get the idea.
And as you get further out the onion, there's just fewer and fewer privileges. So, for example, what are privileges that you lose going from standard user to low right? So when you go from here to here, what can this guy not do that this guy can?
Yeah, so actually if you go back to the discussion we had around right restricted services, that same philosophy applies between the standard user and the low rights user. So if you do an analysis, you'll find out that the web browser, when running in protected mode, it can only write to a very specific directory. And then some things are virtualized under the covers from an application compatibility perspective to write somewhere else.